Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you could join us tonight for this special look at one of our special collections. My name is Lisa. I'm with the Tampa Hillsborough County Public Library, and I'm joined today by my pal Glennis, who is going to teach us all about the Florida Sentinel Bulletin collection at the C. Blythe Andrews Jr. Public Library. You've also just met Vivian. Vivian's going to be keeping an eye out on our questions box. All right, Glennis, we're going to get started right now with your program.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Thanks, Vivian. So today I'm going to give an overview of the history of the Florida Sentinel Bulletin newspaper, the legacy of the Andrews family, an overview of the entire Florida Sentinel Bulletin collection that we have here in the room, as well as African American resources available in our library system. The collection is located at the C. Blythe Andrews Jr. Public Library in East Tampa. The heart of the collection is the Florida Sentinel Bulletin newspaper, which is an important African American newspaper with a unique history. It was important to help document Black life during segregation. For example, newspapers didn't usually have African American obituaries and events, so like mainstream newspapers didn't, especially like the Tampa Tribune. The Tampa Times would have some at night, but not usually the Tampa Tribune for most of the 20th century. Some background. The Andrews family is a pillar in the Tampa's African American community. C. Blythe Andrews Sr., who created the newspaper, and his two sons, C. Blythe Andrews Jr., who was later the publisher of the newspaper and a local businessman, and the other son, Dr. William Billy Andrews III, who was a well-known physician and also helped with the newspaper in its early years. So they were all very well known. So now let's go over the timeline for the newspaper. In 1919, William W. Andrews started what was called the Florida Sentinel, and it was a newspaper in Jacksonville, Florida, and William was the father of the C. Blythe Andrews Sr. The entire family had a long history in civil rights and newspapers, as well as being doctors and being part of like civic society. And then in December 1945, C. Blythe Andrews Sr., he decided to reopen his newspaper under the same name here in Tampa at 1511 Central Avenue. Then in 1959, he bought another African American paper that was called the Tampa Bulletin. And then he merged the two papers, the Florida Sentinel and the Tampa Bulletin, to form the Florida Sentinel Bulletin. In 1977, his son Junior became editor-in-chief after his father's death in 1996. Junior's two children, S.K. Andrews and T. Blythe III, took over the newspaper. And then in 2019, when we reopened the C. Blythe Andrews Jr. Public Library at our location on MLK, we received 118 bound newspaper volumes from 1945 to 2010, and we moved them to the public library here. And then in 2021, we got another 9 bound volumes to add to that collection, because there was holes in the collection. And here's some great photos that you can see on your screen. You can see C. Blythe Andrews Sr. and Jr., and then the other picture is C. Blythe III, his sister, Kay Andrews, a business associate, and then their father, C. Blythe Andrews Jr. So that's a great family photo. And here's some more photos of the history. We see a photo of the original office, where you see a picture of the original staff of the newspaper, including family members. Actually, a lot of them were family members, including Billy Andrews. And then the other photo is the current building that they're still in, and it's in Ybor City at 2207 East 21st Avenue. And that's a great picture from that time. You can see from the cars. And one thing to know about the newspaper is that, you know, the family is more than just That's a family legacy, and it's more than just a newspaper. The family was involved with Central Life Insurance. Senior was an executive, and that's actually where he gained like his wealth. And that Central Life Insurance was a business that helped build wealth in the African American community through shareholders and executives. And many of the most prominent African American people from that time, a lot of them gained their wealth through Central Life Insurance or worked for it in some way. They also were associated with the Lily White Security Benefits Association. And before things like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and all those type of things, communities worked together to help pay for funeral benefits. They paid into a fund. And then all over time, it was extended to other healthcare benefits. And that included when they built the Lily White Hospital, which was built in 1948, and it was only the second hospital available for Tampa's African Americans. The first was the Clara Fly Hospital, as well as the Lily White Temple, which is a meeting place they bought for cash in 1938, which on the postcard, you can see the two buildings behind Senior is the hospital and the temple. The temple, they met to do, it was sort of like a fraternal organization. I don't have any pictures of the parades they had in there, but they did a lot of parades and parties, and it was just a social event for the African American
Like
community.
a social community center type.
Right, exactly. But also was associated with the security benefits.
Right.
Um, and and in a time of segregation, it allowed people to have this community and closeness. And the Security Benefits Association, when there was like tragedies in African American communities, even outside of Tampa, they would sometimes like donate to help those communities as well. The family was also associated with Rest Haven, which was a nursing home, one of the earliest in Tampa for middle class African Americans and the poor as well. And then they were also very prominent landowners and landlords. So they had a lot of real estate and other investments. And if you come around East Tampa, you still see like their name associated with like different buildings.
So this wealth that they were able to build and establish within the community really allowed them to sustain this newspaper and to keep that thriving within the community here, huh?
Yes, exactly. So, and also gave them a lot of political influence. So this paper was very important, not just for Tampa, but you'll see in the paper many years they'll say, you know, something about not different towns in Hillsborough County, Manatee, St. Pete, and then they would have also sometimes news of like other like national news happening in the
Mhm.
African American community, as well as some news overseas that people would like to know as Americans.
Right.
Okay, so here we're looking at a video of the C. Blythe Andrews Jr. Public Library. It's a great building. Come and see us, as well as the Florida Sentinel Bulletin collection room. And you're looking at some of our bound volumes. And our mission here is to collect, manage, digitize, and preserve the Florida Sentinel Bulletin newspaper and related materials to increase access to the public and researchers. And here on the video, you're seeing some scans from the newspaper. And our plan is to digitize it in the future. Besides the newspaper, we also have some other magazines, a little bit of Ebony magazine. We have some bound volumes, which are great to look at, as well as some microfilm. Jet magazine as well, from 1979 to 1985 on microfilm. Ebony from the 60s, 2015 bound microfilm, like 1945 to 1991. So some fun things to look at. We also have some displays related to Mr. Andrews Jr. around the room, some pictures where you see pictures of the family and from his life around. We also have a reference book collection, books related to African Americans and various types of media, but especially journalism. So those are
I know
always
we
really.
also in the lobby leading up to it, there's usually a rotating collection in the gallery there as well, right?
That's like an art gallery, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's a very nice space, yes. Um, and then we
It's
also
I always enjoy walking into your branch to, you're brought in through that art and then you get to go back and check out the archives there.
yeah, I mean, it really is a beautiful building, very modern, and all flows together. And then we have some like technology around the room with uh, allows you to scan things as well. So that's quite nice. An overhead camera as well, like a flatbed scanner, as well as a microfilm scanner, which is quite nice. So sure. So then we have this slide uh, about context and representation, and what perspective do we lose viewing things through only one lens? So this was Lisa's idea, which is a great idea, to have a picture from the Sentinel and a picture from the Tampa Tribune about the same event, which was about Dr. Martin Luther King visiting Tampa in November of 1961. And in the Sentinel newspaper, you can see that it's like above the fold, above the headline, it says, "We stand between dying old and emerging new," says Dr. King. And then lower down, you see that there's a picture of Dr. King and some people as well. But the Tampa Tribune, you can't really tell. It's actually below the fold. It's just like one column, which I think is continued somewhere else, but it's not a prominent part of the paper. Yeah, right around there. It just says, Dr. King like visited. So you see that two different papers can have like two very different perspectives of the importance uh, of of the event and the same period. Actually, in the Tampa Tribune, they were really the big story was about the youngest Rockefeller who went missing in the jungle, which, you know, that was actually a big national story. So it's pretty interesting how two different newspapers having very different perspectives about the same event.
And and
So
not just necessarily perspective, there's also the sense of scale that changes too.
yeah,
The
exactly.
with the Tampa Tribune really just glancing at these headlines, really zooming out much more to the national news events. I mean, you have some boy hunting for rock and gardens, find skeleton. You do have the
Yeah,
local interest there, but for the most part, it seems much more oriented to the global picture. And the Sentinel really brings out a lot of the local community issues that are relevant on that day.
right. And I think the thing to know is that um, one, the Tampa Tribune was pretty segregated. So they did very, very few stories about um, African Americans or Black life or anything like that. It would just be, only if it was like a crime or something, or they had to put it in. And usually it was pretty small, sometimes in sports. But, and also, um, when Dr. King came here, he faced like a bomb threat. So it actually was like a pretty big deal because they had to ask people to like leave the building. But you don't get the same sense of how big the event is between what happened, how the Tampa Tribune I think talks about it, and
Mhm.
how the Sentinel. Hmm.
I'm curious, the Sentinel Bulletin, I'm going to skip ahead of the Q&A and I'm going to get a question in for myself
Oh,
here real
okay.
quick. I'm curious, was there any other comparable local newspaper like the Sentinel Bulletin in this part of Florida, or was the Sentinel Bulletin really the only one in like
No, I mean,
Hillsborough and Pinellas that
yeah,
served
they're in Pinellas.
the greater community?
Yeah, in Pinellas, there was like their own paper. There was an African American paper there, and there are other African American papers, but definitely over time, the Sentinel was the one that continued to exist.
Hmm.
It still exists today. It still prints a newspaper, and as we all know, like since like the last 30 years, there's been less and less
Yeah.
papers everywhere. Some cities, I think they're down to like one paper in some cities. Some cities have lost their paper
Hmm.
altogether. So that's what happened. There used to be more African American papers all across the country, but it's been less and less. So that's what happened over time. Um, and so the Sentinel became stronger over time as like the others, went away.
All right. Well, that kind of leads us into what we're doing with the Sentinel Bulletin collection, and what the ongoing project there is.
Yeah, it's a big ongoing project. Um, we're still in the early stages of having the Florida Sentinel Bulletin digitized. We think there'll be approximately over 8,000 publications and approximately um, a little more than 100,000 pages to be digitized. And there'll be three parts of the project. We plan to have professionals help us with the assessment and appraisal, and then of the collection, then digitize the newspaper, which they'll also provide metadata. And we're hoping to create um, maybe some files so people can like use search terms, which would make it easier
Mhm.
for people to use it. So we're pretty happy about that if that happens. Additionally, after we digitize the paper, then the original, we're hoping to have them housed in archival boxes to help preserve them for a longer period. Unfortunately, the thing with newspapers and paper in general is that a lot of times it's cheap paper, so over time, it doesn't last. And some of the oldest stuff is already like 50, 60 years old or more. So they can be very brittle. So it's the best thing is not to touch it. So we're hoping long term, when we get everything digitized, that people won't have to touch the paper, and that will make sure it lasts as long as possible.
That's awesome.
Um,
Hence, we have some resources here that have already done that with some other collections around the world.
yeah, yeah. So our library system is really great because a lot of times people don't realize how many different resources we have. We have some online African American resources such as the Black Newspaper Collection, which has Black newspapers from across the country from 1893 to 2010, and they have at least 29 publications. And it's a great resource. Like, I've done research on when Dr. Martin Luther King passed away, some other big events, and it's amazing to be able to read real, like, just great reporting and learn facts that I never knew before by going back and reading these newspapers. So it's just fascinating. We also have the African American Heritage, which has which has genealogy records, including like the census, Freedmen's Bank records. Has a message board. So it's a great genealogy resource because it's all just about African Americans. We also have something called the Black Life in America, which we got a couple years ago, but it's a great resource. And it shows the experience and impact of African Americans from different news media, so from magazines and newspapers and journals and things like that. And they try to really get the full breadth of the African American experience in America. So, and we also have like a QR code,
Oh,
which
let
was
me
up
get
on the
that.
screen there, which is right there, um, which is a link to um, our African American resources in our special collections library. So that's nice. You can find out what we have and where they're
But if you don't
located.
have the QR handy when you're looking it up, if you just go to our homepage/research, that'll also bring all of these options up for you.
Right. And those libraries where there is the C. Blythe Andrews Junior Public Library, the Robert Saunders Public Library and the John F. Germany Public Library is what tends to be where we have a lot of our African American special collections resources. And then something else we have, which is great, is in our digital collections. We have some special resources we're going to highlight. One is Our Lives, Our Legacies, the Hillsborough Black Experience, and which the goal of that collection was to record and preserve the stories of African Americans resident in Hillsborough County. It was one person interviewing another person, and we did that a couple of years ago, and it was a wonderful experience as part of a StoryCorps grant, I think. And they also have they made a copy of the stories they have in the collection, and they actually left that with the Library of Congress. So that's a great resource. And the last one there, it says the Berger Brothers Photographic Collection. A lot of you probably have heard of the Berger Brothers and the collection here at the library, because it is the largest collection of its type about Tampa Bay and Florida's West Coast from the late 1800s to the early 1960s. And it represents all different parts of like everyday life, including commercial, residential, social. You just learn a lot. And as part of those photographs, there are hundreds of photos of African Americans are included. So great resource.
Well, that brings us almost to the end. So if you have any questions, go ahead and get them typed in. Vivian and I will start calling them out as we see them. I'll just take a quick sec. I love the idea of having things in context. And one of the things that I find so neat about looking through like the physical collection or the physical newspaper from then, being able to leaf through the bound volumes is, it's one thing if I look up a major historical event and read about that historical event, that gives me the facts of the thing that happened at that moment. But when you leaf through that bound volume and you kind of see all the other things that were going on around that time, the little things, when you notice that, a loaf of bread, 5 cents, or hey, also there's this fuel shortage happening, and you get all these other little bits and pieces that kind of give you that different perspective on the thing that you're reading about that happened in that one big moment. It gives you a lot of those little nuggets of information that paints a much brighter picture of the reality of the situation. And I think that's one of the amazing things about a collection like this, is that this is something we might not have otherwise.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Vivian, you got any questions coming in?
We have a few questions. One of the questions that we got was regarding the Lily White Hospital and the temple, if those buildings are still standing.
Unfortunately, no, they no longer are standing. That's actually a question that we get a lot, especially with the hospital. But yeah, no, neither of them are still standing.
Okay. And one of the other questions is the microfilm, and I guess for the collection as well, do you need an appointment to view them, or can you just walk in?
There's not an appointment. Usually, if I'm not here in the room, then you can come upstairs to the reference desk. We have a reference desk on the second floor in this library, and you can let us know what you're looking for. And I can do research for certain things and send that to you. Or if the person actually needs to come down, then I can come down or somebody else can come down with them. So it's not an appointment, but it's not something that they can always walk in, but there's always someone to help you.
And
Awesome. Well, I think that, go ahead.
Nope, that was it. That was it. We had those questions.
Awesome. All right. Well, if you think of a question later, you can just pop onto our website, hcplc.org/contact. That has all of our information, our phone number, 813-273-3652. But one of the other great things that we have on that contact page is the Ask a Librarian button. If you click on that during business hours, you'll be able to talk to one of our local Hillsborough County librarians. So if you have any follow-up questions about the resources that we talked about, or any of the, if you're doing some research and you're not sure where to get started on a certain thing, pop on that Ask a Librarian button, type your question in there, and they'll get you pointed right in the right direction. So it's super helpful. If you might not want to pick up the phone to call, that's fair enough. I don't like to do that either. Sometimes a text or chat is a more fun option. So try that out sometime if you haven't already. Yeah, and we always send out our program survey after the webinar, so you can send in a question there. We can get back to you that way as well. But otherwise, we hope to see you at the C. Blythe Andrews Junior Public Library. Remember, they're on MLK Junior Boulevard, 2607. So we hope to see you there. Check it out. It's a beautiful space. They're also going to be hosting the upcoming Storytelling Festival there soon, getting all that fun stuff back in our branches. We're excited for that. hcplc.org/events if you want to check out the events calendar. Linus, thank you so much for bringing this information to us.
Thank you.
Vivian, thank you for getting those questions for us. And thank you all for joining us. We will see you next time. Bye, friends.